Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of SLR Lounge's weekly Constructive Critique. My name is Pye and I'm going to be your host as well as your critiquer. Now, the SLR Lounge Constructive Critique forums can be found by going to slrlounge.com. Click on the forums link in the top menu. It's going to take you right over to this page here. Now, once you click on the Constructive Critique section of the forum, it'll take you to this page. We do recommend, we actually ask everybody to read the rules before participating, just so we all have great critiquing etiquette. We want to make sure all the comments that we're posting are actually helpful. They're not rude or immature or basically non-constructive in any way. All right, so let's get started. We have kind of a little theme here. We had a lot of portraits, and so this episode we're going to kind of focus on portraiture. So let's go to our first image. This is Little Angel by Brown Cardinal Photo. Now, this was on a D300 on a 50mm lens at f13, 1/100th of a second shutter at ISO 200, and the post-production is in Photoshop. This is of the granddaughter outside of a church. Now, there's a couple things I'd probably say for the image. I think it's a great capture of your granddaughter. I like that about it. As far as the post-production itself, we have kind of a bit of blooming or this halo effect that you probably added in post-production. It's something that I think has gotten a little bit on the, I don't want to say cliche, but it's a little bit overdone. And that's not to say it shouldn't be done, because there are certain instances if you're shooting an editorial photo or you want to have that glow where you need to add something like that. But in general, I would say for children's portraiture, adding that effect kind of reminds me of kind of the 1980s and 1990s portraiture, where you have this really soft glow effect applied to everything. So it sort of dates the image. So that's the one thing I'd kind of recommend on that side. Now, otherwise, for what you're shooting on right here is a 50mm lens, I'd probably recommend that you actually shoot at a lower f-stop, or basically bring and open up the aperture so that you're shooting, like, say at 2.0 or 2.8. I'm not sure if this is a 50mm 1.4 or 1.8, but you can do a really great job of isolating the subject. And I'm not sure if you've done that in post-production now, because if you're shooting at f13, the background should actually be pretty sharp in this image. So this maybe was kind of added, like you did the blur effect in post-production or something, I'm not sure. But shooting at that lower aperture is great for portraiture because it's really going to soften up overall in the image. It's going to make skin tones look better and so forth. So I'd recommend shooting a little bit wider, especially on shots like this. We want to really isolate the subject from the background. Last little bit of critique I would probably give is some sort of sense of what the image is. Right here we have baby looking off camera, which tells us that it's a kind of a candid moment, but we don't necessarily know what the baby's doing. And so that kind of adds a little bit of question to what's really going on. If the baby's looking into the lens, then we know it's a portrait and you don't really need to show anything else other than the baby. But for this one, I'm kind of left wondering what's going on in this scene. All right, so that's it on this image. Great job, and hope to see more submissions in the forum. Let's go on to our next image here. We have a DJ portrait from Cyro. This is shot on, let's see, we have a D5100 on a 18-70 AFS DX lens, 3.5 to 4.5 aperture. It was shot at 1/30th of a second, f4.5, ISO 500, and 50mm. So there's a couple things I would recommend on this shot. Let's pull it up on Flickr. One is, as far as the camera settings go, don't use those intermediate ISOs. So on your D5100, either 100, 200, 400, 800, those are gonna be your natives, or 200, 400, 800. I'm not sure what the base is, but basically take that base and multiply by 2, and that becomes your native ISO. So shooting at these intermediates is automatically gonna kind of reduce a little bit of the quality and the detail that you're gonna see in the image. So let me go back and check out the other settings. Now you're probably strobing this image, which is what it looks like here. So the shutter speed isn't gonna matter too much because you're flashing them and it's basically freezing the subject for you. Okay, so there's a couple things I'd recommend as far as what we're trying to tell in this story here. We have a DJ here, and what we're trying to do is basically get the sense that he is a DJ. And the lighting and everything is fine. It's a little bit kind of, we have a lot of shadows and everything, but that's not really a big deal. What, to me, would really sell this image is if we have more saying that he's a DJ. Right now, the only thing that kind of says he's a DJ is the fact that he's holding headphones. Now, holding those headphones could mean that he's a musician, could mean that he likes to make beats, could mean that he just likes to listen to music, could mean a lot of different things. Could mean that he's a gamer. We don't necessarily know that he's a DJ. So with these types of shots, I really like to incorporate, the environment and the scene to whatever extent you possibly can. If he's got a mixing table, like maybe you can't shoot him at a live event, but maybe he's got a mixing table, and being able to put that mixing table into the foreground, shoot low so he kind of has that authoritative standpoint while he's looking down and mixing, really says and tells the story that he's a DJ. Right now, I'm not quite getting that from basically what we have here. All right, but otherwise, great job, and let's go on to the next image. Here we have 7-second window by MZ Gloves 20. Now let's see what he said, or she. 7-second window meaning total amount of time a 4-year-old gives you to pose her, set up your camera, take the shot before she is gone. And that is very much true. Now I don't know really how this was shot, so we can't critique as far as the camera settings go. I love the overall portrait. I think it's great. You have her face angled towards the window. We have great light coming into her face, giving her really nice bright eyes and a great catch light. Overall, it's really nice. I love her expression as well. And there's a couple things that could be fixed here with this image. Now again, a 7-second portrait, well, if you're shooting this in the moment and there's not really much you can do, then take this advice, with a grain of salt, because well, there's not much you can do. But if you have the chance to pose and to kind of set this up, then there's a couple things I would do differently for this shot. One, I would try and bring her left arm off of her chest, basically. Like she can be playing with a toy, she can have her hand on the windowsill, but just not smushed against her chest, because it makes her arm look quite a bit wider than it actually is. And it almost looks unnaturally large for a child. I know her arm is not that big in real life. It's just because given that her shoulder is pushed forward and her arm is flat against the chest, it's widening out a bit more and it's close to the camera, so it's appearing a little bit larger. Number two is going to be to get her hair to actually cover the top of that ear right there, so it's not poking out. It's a little bit distracting because we have basically this highlight right over an area of shadow, and that's why it draws quite a bit of attention over to it. Last thing, number three, is just to clean up a little bit of this hair on the left side, particularly where it goes over the shoulder. We have a lot of flyaways, and this hair going over kind of skin is something that I really try and avoid. I like it going over the shoulder like this, but I like it to be grouped together to kind of eliminate the flyaways in the hair and kind of eliminate the randomness of how it falls over the shoulder. Unless this is like a mid-moment capture where she's like looking back and smiling at the camera, and it has that kind of foof or that kind of throw in the hair as she's doing it. All right, so other than that, great job. Really nice portrait here. Has a lot of emotion, a lot of feel to it. I love it. Let's go on to New Puppy. This is another type of portrait. This is by Dretket, and it was taken with a D5100, 51.8, shot at 1/160 with a second f2 ISO 200. Great settings for a portrait image because you're really isolating the subject. You're throwing the background into a nice blur. It's really perfect for that lens. And again, on any of my 50mm, it doesn't matter if I'm shooting on a 1.2, a 1.4, or a 1.8. I'm always shooting with a minimum of around f2, just because I feel like at 1.2 on my 50mm, it's just a little bit too soft, and we have too shallow of a depth of field. So great settings. We have natural light coming through the window on the right. Post-production was done with the Lightroom 4 presets, which is always awesome to see. And looks like you included a gradient filter from the top to burn the background. And you probably did that in post, I think. That's what you meant, instead of in the, whatchamacallit. You didn't actually use a graduated filter on the lens. Overall, I dig it. I think from the post-production to the shot to everything, it's really great. It'd be great if Puppy, it looks like one of the eyes is kind of going off to the side. One thing I like to do when I'm shooting animals is just kind of like bark or clap or do something right before the shot to get them to look right at you into the camera, if it's possible, Maybe Puppy just likes to look that way, or maybe Puppy has a lazy eye, unfortunately. I don't know. But that's the only thing there. I like the lighting. I like that directional light. You could always add a little bit of a fill if you want to kind of fill in the directional light, to kind of fill in the shadow areas. But with fur, I find that directional light is really nice because it adds a lot of texture to it. The only other things I'd clean up with this image is that we have, I'm not sure if this is from healing or if it's just from the basically the bokeh that's being created at that shallow depth of field, but we have two lines kind of coming up in the image over here. It looks almost like it's been cloned out, but not quite. So that's kind of one thing I would clean up just a little better, to kind of blend these lines here so we don't see that, whether it was done in post or whether it was done in camera. It would kind of just eliminate a little bit of that distraction. Otherwise, great job with this image. I really dig it. Let's go on to soft focus portrait. Here we have, let's see, is it this one? Nope. Let's click on it. Okay, so let's take a look at the settings real quick. It's on a 7D at 100 shutter, f2.8. Oh, it's actually at 1/160th of a second shutter. Okay, 100mm lens is what they mean. Okay, and it was shot at f2.8, processed in Lightroom 4. Okay, so there's a couple things that I would do here. I think it's a great portrait. It looks a little bit soft just because, I think it's just because of the forum, the way it's uploading. The main thing that I really am not vibing on this image, you have a great shot here. We have good lighting. We could always use a little bit of this is an image I'd use a silver reflector underneath to bounce a little bit of light back up into the eyes. It just kind of create a little bit softer overall light, create a nice little fill there, and we'd get beautiful catch lights in the eyes as well. But the one thing that's kind of throwing me off here is not the composition, not anything, it's just the post-production reverse vignetting. Again, this is one of those effects that was heavily used in kind of the 90s with the glamour portraits, and it really reminds me of it. It doesn't mean that there's not a place for it, but I kind of would shy away this kind of stuff because it automatically dates the image, at least to people that have seen, portraiture in the 90s. So I kind of get that vibe from it. But otherwise, I think it's great. I like the portrait. I love the crop. You cropped it just right. It's good focus. We have, a great expression. Everything else is right on. And that's an easy fix because it's in post-production anyway. So good job. Let's go on to the next shot here, which is image 9260 by Marcel LR. This is on a 60D 18-55 IS2 lens, 1/60 of a second, f5.6 ISO 400, 55mm focal length. Or maybe lens if you have a 55 prime. It wouldn't be probably be a third-party one. Probably just the focal length. Okay, let's go. This is on Flickr, and it was shot with sunlight. Now, I had a really hard time this week of actually picking which one I wanted to be the winner for this week's weekly CC. It was between this one and the one I'm going to show you guys in a second. This one's right up there along with the same quality and kind of, I just love the storytelling in this image. And we said something before about basically not cropping at fingers, and that's a kind of a rule that you don't typically crop at fingers. But I always say this: once you know the rules, guys, rules are meant to be broken. And this is an image where the crop at the fingers, it totally works. I'm not focused at all in that area because what the hand and what the fingers are telling me in this image is just that he's basically holding his jacket with his finger. And my attention is really brought to kind of this cool puff of smoke that's coming out of his mouth, this really kind of casual and candid shot of him as he's almost walking or just kind of, oblivious to the camera. In this kind of a shot, who cares where it's cropped? It doesn't matter if his fingers are cropped. It's not a big deal for this. And that's why I always want to tell people, the rules, they're meant to be understood and to be used as a general guideline. But you know what? Rules are always meant to be broken when it's appropriate. And this is a situation that is totally appropriate. I also love that your shutter is slow enough, and let's see if we have the settings on that. Yeah, 1/60 of a second. Your shutter is slow enough right now that you're capturing some movement in the smoke. And I dig that because it adds a little bit of extra motion and animation to the image, which helps with that smoke and giving it kind of that blur and, I don't know, that misty kind of look to it. I really dig it. So this is a great shot. I love it. It's a very moody kind of street portrait. The only thing I might do differently is this is really just a matter of preference. As far as the toning for this image, I probably would prefer more of either a cool black and white or just a standard silver black and white without the additional kind of reds added to it. But I think it works with the reds too. That's really just a matter of preference on my side. So great job overall with this portrait. I love it. And let's go on to the next image. And this is our weekly winner for this week. This is a first time post before and after portrait by HTran5. All right, so HTran5 has only been doing photography for 1.5 years. They are a grad student who loves taking pictures. It was edited in Lightroom 4.2. The settings were 1/320 of a second, f2.8, ISO 150 millimeters. Now let's take a look at the image. We have it right here. And I love this shot. I mean, we have the raw that we can see right here on the left side. It's a great image. We have the after over here on the right side. Now, once again, there are a few things that I would critique about this image, but it's still a great example of just getting out there, using the knowledge that you've gained to try and create something. And I love the post-production result because we have a really nice job in kind of smoothing out a little bit of the lines without going too far. We can still see texture in the skin. The eyes are nice and they're a little bit extra contrast there, but we don't see them kind of popping off the face like alien form. We have just a nice subtle post-production applied to the image, and it's a really good job. So here's what I love. The lighting is great on this image. We have very soft, beautiful lighting. We have great catch lights, good settings, great focus. Everything is done right on that side. I might have shot it with a little bit more, generally I try and include a little bit of kind of shoulder just to see it so we don't see kind of the neck cropped out. But that's really a preferential item. The only critique that I have really for this image is kind of the compositional choice as far as placing her right next to this little cement or whatever this is over here. In general, I see this quite a bit, and it's one of those things that I'm not really a big fan of. I know we're using it kind of as a leading line in this image to kind of bring our attention to her, but for me, there's not really much that this piece or this object is doing for the image. And as far as storytelling, it almost feels like it's just a little bit strange to me that she would be putting her head next to kind of this cement curb almost. I'll see this kind of shot a lot with, like, say, a red brick wall that would extend from top to bottom, and it would go from basically the top of the image all the way down, and it fits a little bit better because it's a little bit more casual. And you usually see them kind of propped up with their back, they're leaning against the wall, and it makes a little bit more sense there because their backs to the wall, they're leaning against it but looking towards the camera, and so it fits within the kind of story that we're telling here. But with her facing it, I'm kind of left wondering, well, why would she be facing kind of that cement curb? But that's really the only critique there. Everything else was done absolutely correct on this image. And again, it's a perfect example. We're not looking for perfection here in the Constructive Critique forum. We're looking for people trying things, showing improvement, showing that they're learning these techniques, and just kind of getting out there and being photographers and doing what's most important, which is to get out and shoot. The last thing I would probably recommend also in post is just with these flyaways that are going right across the eye is just to zoom in there and kind of clean those up so we don't have these little lines going across the eyes, particularly in that area. But I'd also probably fix the flyaways down low too. It's very easy to get in there with a really small clone or heel brush and just to get that out of there too. All right, so great job. Be sure to shoot us an email at contact@SLR Lounge to claim your prize, and we'll see you all in the next episode of Constructive Critique.